And what a long and weary way it was. The forest stretched on seemingly forever with the most monotonous predictability, each tree just like the next. Trunk, branches, leaves, trunk, branches, leaves. Of course, a tree would have taken a different view of the matter. We all tend to see the way others are alike, and how we differ, and it's probably just as well we do, since that prevents a great deal of confusion. But perhaps we should remind ourselves from time to time that ours is a very partial view, and that the world is full of a great deal more variety than we ever managed to take in. At this stage of our journey, however, the appliances had lost sight of this important truth, and they were bored and impatient in addition simply to being worn to a frazzle. Rust spots had begun to develop alarmingly on the unchromed bottom of the toaster, and inside it as well. The stiffness that the vacuum and lamp complained of each morning on rising no longer vanished with a bit of exercise, but persisted through the day. As for the blanket, it was almost in tatters, poor thing. Alone of the appliances, the radio seemed not to have suffered damage from the demands of the trip. The toaster began to worry that when they did at last arrive to the master's apartment, they would be in such raggle-taggle condition that he would have no further use for them. They'd be put on the scrap heap, and all their efforts to reach him would have been in vain. What a dreadful reward for so much loyalty and devotion! But it is a rare human being who will be swayed by considerations of the heart in his dealings with appliances, and the master, as the toaster well knew, was not notable for his tender conscience. Its own predecessor at the cottage had still been quite serviceable when it had been sent to the dump, its only faults having been that its chrome had been worn away in patches, and that its sense of timing was sometimes erratic. In its youth, the toaster had thought these sufficient grounds for the older appliance's replacement, but now it was better not to think about such matters, better simply to pursue one's duty wherever it led, along the path through the forest. Until at the bank of a wide river, that path finally came to an end. They were all, at first sight of that broad impassable expanse of water, utterly cast down and despairing. None more so than the Hoover, which became almost incoherent in its distress.
No!
It roared aloud.
I refuse, never. Oh, stop, turn me off. Oh, empty my bag, leave me alone, go away.
It began to choke and sputter, and then ran over its own cord and started chewing on it. Only the toaster had enough presence of mind to wrest the cord from the vacuum's powerful suction grip. Then, to calm it down, it led the Hoover back and forth across the greasy bank of the river in regular carpet-sweeping swathes. At last, these habitual motions brought the Hoover around to a more reasonable frame of mind, and it was able to account for its extraordinary alarm. It was not only the sight of this new obstacle that had distressed it so, but as well its certainty that the battery was now too run down for them to be able to return to the cottage by its power. They could not go forward, and they could not turn back. They were marooned in the middle of the forest, and soon it would be fall, and they would have no shelter from the inclemencies of the autumn weather, and then it would be winter, and they'd be buried in the snow. Their metal parts would corrode. The Hoover's rubber belt would crack. They would be powerless to resist the forces that would slowly but surely debilitate and destroy them, and in only a few months, or even weeks, they would all be unable to work. No wonder the Hoover, foreseeing the inevitable progression of things, had been beside itself. What were they to do? The toaster asked itself. There was no answer immediately forthcoming. Toward evening, the radio announced that it was receiving interference from a source quite nearby.
A power drill by the feel of it, just on the other side of the river.
Where there was a power drill, there was bound to be power lines as well. New hope poured into the appliances like a sudden surge of current.
Let's look at the map again,
said the lamp.
Maybe we can find out exactly where we are.
Following the lamp's suggestion, they unfolded the road map and looked very carefully at all the dots and squiggles between the spot, marked with a magic marker, along the highway where the cottage was situated, and the little patch of pink representing the city they were bound for. At last, only a quarter-inch from the pink patch of the city, they found the wavery blue line that had to be the river they'd come to, since there were no other blue lines anywhere between the cottage and the city, and this river was too big for the map makers to have forgotten all about it.
We're almost there,
the radio trumpeted.
We'll make it. Everything'll be all right. Hurrah!
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 The other appliances agreed, except for the Hoover, who wasn't so easily convinced that all would now be well. But when the lamp pointed out 4 distinct places where the river was traversed by highways, even the Hoover had to admit that there was a cause to cheer up. though it still wouldn't go so far as to say,
"Hurrah."
"We only have to follow this river," said the toaster, who did like to give instructions even when it was obvious what had to be done. "Either to the left or to the right, and eventually it must lead us to one of those bridges. Then when it's very late and there's no traffic, we can make a dash for it." So once again they set off with courage renewed and determination strengthened. It was not so light a task as the toaster had made it sound, for there was no longer a clear path to follow. Sometimes the bank of the river lay flat as a carpet, but elsewhere the ground got bumpy or, what was worse, quaggy and soft. Once avoiding a rock, the Hoover took a sharp turn, and the office chair, getting a leg mirrored in an unremarked patch of mud, was overturned, and the 4 appliances riding on it tumbled off the plastic seat into the thorough slough. They emerged smirching and spattered, and were obliged to become dirtier still in the process of retrieving the caster wheel that had come off the chair and was lost in the mud. The blanket naturally was exempted from this task, and while the 4 others delved into the lost wheel, it betook itself down the water's edge and attempted to wash away the signs of its spill. Lacking any cloth or sponge, the blanket only succeeded, sad to say, in spreading the stains over a larger area. So preoccupied was the blanket with this hopeless task that it almost failed to notice. "A boat!" the blanket cried out. "All of you, come here, I found a boat!" Even the toaster, with no experience at all in nautical matters, could see that the boat the blanket had discovered was not of the first quality. Its wood had the weathered, beaten look of the clapboard at the back of the summer cottage that the master had always been meaning to replace, or at least repaint, and its bottom must be leaky, for it was filled with one big puddle of green mush. Nevertheless, it must have been basically serviceable, since a Chris-Craft outboard motor was mounted on the blunt back end, and who would put an expensive motor on a boat that couldn't at least stay afloat?
"How providential,"
said the Hoover. "You don't intend for us to use this boat, do you?" asked the toaster.
"Of course we shall,"
replied the vacuum.
"Who knows how far it may be to a bridge? This will take us across the river directly. You're not afraid to ride in it, are you?"
"Afraid? Certainly not."
"Well, then."
"It doesn't belong to us. If we were to take it, would we be no better than pirates?" Pirates, as even the newest of my listeners will have been informed, are people who take things that belong to other people. They are the bane of an appliance's existence, since once an appliance has been spirited away by a pirate, it has no choice but to serve its bidding, just as though it were that appliance's legitimate master. A bitter disgrace, such servitude, and one that few appliances can hope to escape once it has fallen to their lot. Truly, there is no fate, even obsolescence, so terrible as falling into the hands of pirates.
"Pirates!"
exclaimed the Hoover.
"Us? What nonsense. Who ever heard of an appliance that was a pirate?"
"But if we took the boat," the toaster insisted.
"We wouldn't keep it,"
said the Hoover brusquely.
"We'd just borrow it a little while to cross the river, and leave it on the other side. Its owner would get it back soon enough."
"How long we'd have it for doesn't matter. It's the principle of the thing. Taking what isn't yours is piracy."
"Oh, as for principles,"
said the radio lightly,
"there's a well-known saying, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Which means, as far as I can see, that someone who makes use of his abilities should get to use a boat when he or it needs to cross river and when the boat is just sitting there waiting."
With which, and a little chuckle besides, the radio hopped into the foremost seat of the rowboat. Following the radio's example, the Hoover heaved the office chair into the back of the boat and then got in itself. The boat settled deep in the water. Avoiding the toaster's accusing look, the blanket took his seat beside the radio. The lamp seemed to hesitate, but only for a moment. Then it too entered the boat.
"Well,"
said the Hoover gruffly.
"we're waiting."
Reluctantly, the toaster prepared to board the boat, but then, inexplicably, something made it stop. What's happening, it wondered, though it could not say the words aloud, for the same force preventing it from moving prevented its speech as well. The 4 appliances in the boat had been similarly incapacitated. What had happened, of course, was that the owner of the boat had returned and seen the appliances.
"Well, what's this?"
he exclaimed, stepping from behind a willow tree with a fishing rod in one hand and a string of sunfish in the other.
"Seems we've had some visitors."
He said more than this, but in a manner so rough and ill-mannered that it is better not to repeat his words verbatim. The sum of it was this, that he believed the owner of the appliances had been about to steal his boat, and so he intended, by the way of retaliation, to steal the appliances. He took the toaster from where it sat spellbound on the grassy riverbank and set it into the rowboat aside the blanket, lamp, and radio. Then, unfastening the battery from the office chair, he threw the latter end over end, high up into the air. It came down, splash, in the middle of the river, and sank down to the muddy bottom, never more to be seen. Then the pirate, for there could be no longer any doubt that such he was, started the Chris-Craft motor and set off upstream with his 5 helpless captives. After mooring his boat alongside a ramshackle dock, on the other side of the river, the pirate loaded the outboard motor and the appliances onto the wooden bed of a very dusty pickup truck, except for the radio which he took with him into the front seat. As it drove off, the truck jolted and jounced and bolted and bounced so violently the toaster feared the ride would cost it every coil in its body. For though toasters look quite sturdy, they are actually among the more delicate appliances and need to be handled accordingly. But the blanket, realizing the danger the toaster was in, managed to slip underneath its old friend and cushion it from the worst shocks of the journey. As they rode, they could hear the radio in the front seat humming the poignant theme song from Dr. Zhivago.
Listen,
the Hoover hissed.
Of all possible songs to be singing, it has chosen one of the Master's favorites. Already it's forgotten him.
Ah, said the toaster. What choice does it have, poor thing? Once one of us has been turned on, would we have behaved any otherwise? Would you? Would I? The old vacuum groaned, and the radio went on playing its sad, sad song.